Okay, we have some depressing breaking news here, but the PS5 price is going up again. And I do say again because for those keeping score at home, it's gone up 3, 4 times, I think, now at this point. Still not the US, but we've seen prices go up, and it's happened again just recently, confirmed on the PlayStation blog. There's a pretty weird breakdown here, but we are seeing both consoles in certain circumstances go up, that being the digital edition and the base console. No PS5 Pro price changes, but Sony does say, and I quote here, "With the backdrop of a challenging economic environment, including high inflation and fluctuating exchange rates, SIE has made a tough decision to raise the recommended retail price of the PlayStation 5 console in select markets in Europe, Middle East and Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. The updated PS5 RRPs are effective starting April 14th, so pretty much right away. So the digital edition console in Europe is going up to 500 euros, no changes for the standard console. In the UK, going up to £429 sterling. Australia, you've got the standard PS5 with the disc drive that's going up to $829. Digital edition is $749. New Zealand, standard console with the disc drive, that's going to be $949. PS5 digital edition, $859. Again, no price changes to the PS5 Pro. Now, they do say additionally the disc drive for PS5 is going to get an RRP decrease effective same time, April 14th, so pretty much right away. So in Europe, that's going down to 80 euros, UK, 70 pounds, Australia, 124, New Zealand, 140. So I guess that's their their way of softening the blow a little bit, because that is, I guess, the context here in that it seems like every time they've had to increase the price, usually it is the disc drive console, but just to, the digital edition console, I should clarify. But just to recap the timeline so far, we did have the first price increase. That was in 2022, I believe, where they adjusted pricing on I think either one console or both of them, but that was in Canada, Mexico, Australia, China, Japan, UK, Europe. They pretty much were the entire time trying to avoid the North American market. But there was then the price increase in Japan late last year, and then it was October 2023 with the launch of the PS5 Slim, where in the US we saw just the digital edition go from $399 to $449, and that was then the introduction of the disc drive accessory. And of course, we all know the sort of story here when it comes to PS5 Pro's very shocking price tag, and that might be more illustrative of exactly why it's priced the way that it is, because even at that, when we were having that conversation when that console came out, yeah, it was that really big sticker shock. And we could sit here and argue all day, every day about how even at that price tag, the console still represents a very good price to performance ratio, but it still was kind of a shocking thing to see any sort of console touch that price tag, right? So there was that sort of obvious notion that they've got some room there and are probably making a decent amount of money on PS5 Pro consoles, which are still always going to represent a smaller volume of sales in relation to the entire PS5 install base, but that's neither here nor there. And this kind of goes back to a story on LTPS last Friday. When I filmed that story, we had only got the price announcement in for PS Plus, rather, the PS Plus subscription price is going up, only in Latin America, which was 15 countries. And I saw that. I filmed the story, and I said, right, I was sitting there filming the story, and I'm like, boy, I really hope this doesn't hit other places. And then as I'm editing that episode, more came out from the PlayStation blog, and then them confirming it in Australia. So now in total, we've got PS Plus price increasing happening in Latin America, Southeast Asia, South Korea, and Australia. And the really kind of, I don't want to say weird, but what's so ironic is that we just got the news that there are tariff exemptions happening in, which relates to the U.S. administration, obviously. So it's just this particular country, but there are exemptions now in place. But that does not include video game consoles. So there's a very new, recent, temporary, mind you, exemption that's been put in place for PCs and smartphones. But video game consoles are specifically absent from that list. So video game console components are apparently covered. Also solid-state non-volatile storage devices. So that basically includes Nintendo Switch game cards. But for now, there is still a 145% tariff in place for most goods coming in. And it's kind of the same points we were making prior about the whole tariff situation, in that, between Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo, where they source their consoles from either Japan, China, or Vietnam. In relation to Nintendo, that's a lot of China and Vietnam splits that they're trying to manage in this economic environment, given that they know the administration's kind of flip-flopping on a dime here, and they're trying to sort of navigate what is a very important moment for them in particular, because they've got a new console launch happening, whereas Sony and Microsoft are a few years into their life cycle, so they've got a little bit of wiggle room here as far as trying to avoid having to increase the price, because that's the point I'll still stand behind here. I mean, it's still that sort of very pessimistic viewpoint of they would love to have an excuse to raise prices and get away with it, which could flood into other territories. That's why, even though we're talking about the United States and tariffs for our administration, if they can sort of get away with, a new price tag, that's the new normal, and then other countries are okay paying that, and they don't see some sort of really dramatic drop off in sales, then of course I think they'd be pretty happy about that. But they still have a sort of duty here as far as what a console represents, a very affordable plug and play box. If that stops being the case, then it's going to start impeding on their sales. So they still, I think for the most part, don't want to increase the price if they don't want to. And being this far into the life cycle, consoles historically, they've always gone down in price. And that's what's so weird about this cycle, is that not only are they staying the same price, now we've got situations of them going up because of all the inflation, because of all the political and the possible trade war that's going on. There's just so many different variables at place. And now these big companies are in a place where they also have to start considering their options for trying to get around these things, because they still don't necessarily want to make these things that expensive. They don't want to squeeze the consumer that much than some are led to believe, but they do have to start looking at different supply chains and sourcing parts and moving things around and sort of getting around these things. And it's hard to make a very long-term decision not knowing what's going to happen in even a few weeks, much less 2, 3, 4 years. You know what I mean? There's just a big financial risk and investment when you start considering or even humoring the idea that they start opening up some sort of manufacturing facility that's, let's say, in the United States, right? So that's what makes it so complicated. But when we talk about strictly PlayStation in this case, they're still, as I say, like, they're well positioned, but you can sort of suss out what's going on here as far as like what they're trying to work with. The digital edition console, for the most part, has been the one that's seen the most price increases, and that was their lowest price console. I mean, I still, to this day, I was very surprised back in 2020 when they announced that console, and the price lineup was $400, $500. I'm like, $100 difference between the digital edition and the disc drive. I was like, that's kind of insane. I thought for sure it would be $50. And they were losing money on that digital edition console for quite a while, which that is sort of the console model for a lot of manufacturers in that case. Nintendo, historically, in recent console cycles, they do like to make money almost immediately, but broadly speaking, in a lot of console cycles between all three platform holders, the model is when you ship a brand new machine, you do lose money, you make it back on your software sales, accessories, now services, and they're much more lucrative nowadays too. I mean, that's also the thing we can't ignore here, is that, Sony shows this during fiscal reports, during business segment briefings. You can see just how profitable and lucrative the PlayStation 4 cycle is, and now PS5 more so. These machines made so much more money than PlayStation 2, for example, a machine that you would think, at a sort of cursory glance, oh, that's the most successful console that was ever made. They sold how many machines? So surely they made a ton of money, and they did. But compared to the online environment we're in, where games are monetized so much further, and you've got subscription, and, well, obviously there's inflation to consider here for why they've made so much more just on a revenue basis, but I think you see my point when you look at those charts. It's quite alarming just how much more they can make and sustain and generate over these existing platform cycles. So it's just, there's nothing great about it, right? I think everybody's kind of a loser here in this circumstance. And now I am sitting here wondering, where do we go? Because you can see they don't want to increase the price here. It's a very important market, but then again, every market's important to them. PlayStation does very well, and they've got this, as we say, unchecked lane. You've got their closest competitor historically basically throwing in the towel and saying, okay, you can have our games, we're done. You know what I mean? So it's like PlayStation 5 is the de facto high-end console right now. So every market, and certainly Europe, they sell so many PS5s in Europe, everywhere is important to them. So I don't think they want to do this, but at the same time, like, it's happening. It's happening, and oh my God, it really, really sucks. Everything is getting more expensive, and that's just what's so depressing about this. This is the kind of hobby that it's never been cheap, but, when you're put in this very tough situation of this is supposed to be an escape for you, it's enjoyable, it's something that you see a lot of happiness out of, and now now this happens. I don't know. I generally try to be a very positive person, but man, this is just like the worst kind of news you could possibly see, right? Just, ugh, God, I don't know where we go from here. You would think it can't get worse, but I don't think we've found the bottom just yet, and that's what's really concerning. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me in this bad breaking news, but we'll talk more about some probably some other stories that aren't exactly all that good very soon, maybe tomorrow or Wednesday, but we'll see how that pans out. But I'll see you all in the next video. You take it easy.